I'm Samantha Tomlinson.
I'm Kevin Tracy, and joining us today is my good friend, Mr. Ben. Why don't you say hello to everyone, Ben?
Hello there, I'm Ben Deckert.
Yeah.
Just said Mr. Ben. I'm like, is he like Cher or Beyonce? Well, no,
Yeah.
Beyonce has a
Well, I
last
didn't
name.
know if you wanted me to share your last name or not. It's just like, it's Mr. Ben. Hey. You're our resident Mr. Rogers for this episode.
Fun.
All right. So yeah, this week we are talking about The Lighthouse, a movie that Ben and I actually saw in theaters when that first came out, and oddly enough, Sam suggested that we do this for this episode. So Sam, what was your initial reaction to this movie?
I don't know. I don't know. I'll be honest. The first half of the movie, I was kind of bored, and the second half, it obviously gets a little more interesting because that's when Robert Pattinson's character is very, very clearly and obviously losing his mind.
Yeah.
I suggest this movie because this comes up in conversation with people. Like a lot of people have seen it. I've heard good things. I hadn't heard anything specific other than it's about two people that lose their minds on a remote island.
Yeah.
And like you've said, it's kind of like a horror movie. I've heard it's described. It's definitely, this is a insane, hardcore art film.
Yeah, this is definitely not a movie for everyone. And when I was initially going into this, and Ben, you can attest to this, I was expecting a completely different movie. Like I remember from the trailers, like there was like the fight scene with like Robert Pattinson getting strangled with like the tentacles and like the mermaid. Like I was expecting like some kind of weird Lovecraftian horror movie of these two men just going insane, rather than the movie that we got. Yeah, I know.
That was an inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like, but I was expecting like that to be like the main crux of the whole movie, rather than like 5 minutes of it. So yeah, like, what was your takeaway from this, Ben?
It was weird.
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah, it was. It was really well done, but man, definitely takes multiple watchings to wrap your head around it.
It really does, and I feel like after going through this in a second watching that I did last night, I feel like I kind of was able to take a bit more away from this. Did you kind of get a similar sense of that, Ben?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just...
Yeah, that's kind of why I want to watch it again.
Yeah,
because I feel like I'll get more out of it.
Yeah.
I think I wasn't as... I other than the, like, cinematography, which was really outstanding and was nominated for an Oscar. It did not win, but it was nominated.
Yeah.
And like Sex and the City, the setting is just as much of a character as everyone else. So it was
what the fuck?
But like the setting is just, I feel like the setting is, the location is just as important as the characters.
Yeah.
It's very 100% a true bred art film, and yeah, I agree. I was literally thinking about, like, I don't think my parents would watch this. I feel like they would watch it and be like, "Oh, it was really bad." And I'd be like, it's not bad. Yeah. It's just.
Speaking of parents' reaction, when I was watching this last night, I was watching this in the living room. My dad just kind of like randomly like joined me and was like, "Oh, what are we watching?" It's like, "Oh, it's Lighthouse." Like, "Oh, I've been meaning to watch this," and he was just kind of half watching it and playing like backgammon on his tablet, because that's what dads do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he would like look up every once in a while to like ask questions to like fill in on like the couple minutes that he wasn't like fully paying attention. And by the way, thank God I was watching this movie with subtitles, because watching this in theaters with you, Ben, I could only understand like maybe a third of what Willem Dafoe was saying.
Yeah.
I had to put on subtitles too.
Yeah. No.
They have.
Sam, imagine our struggle watching this in theaters, trying to like,
holy crap,
decipher the weird like sailor gibberish that he is spewing the entire movie.
I feel like both of them, it's pretty hard to understand. Like, I thought that So apparently they both have very specific accents,
Yes.
according to the director. And Robert Pattinson's apparently supposed to be a very specific Maine dialect, like from Maine.
Yeah.
And but I thought when I first heard him talk, I thought he was Irish. Like it's that kind of the dialect sounded did not sound American.
Yeah.
Like it's intense. And yeah, I was listening to subtitle. I was watching it with subtitles for like most of it. I think towards the end I took it off. But yeah, I had it for most of the movie.
Yeah, no, it was just I'm really glad that I had that going on with it because I don't think would have absorbed as much without the subtitles because I can't understand half of what Willem Dafoe is saying. But it was really funny kind of watching it with my dad because I've already experienced this movie, so it's always kind of interesting, kind of watching someone else's like reaction to the first time seeing a movie, especially when you've seen it yourself. Because this movie, like, there are parts where it's like it's not necessarily hard to watch, but it is definitely not for the faint of heart. And there are a few scenes in particular.
Nope.
Well, we'll kind of get into that a little bit more in depth. But it was just kind of interesting kind of seeing like how he was kind of processing and taking in all the information that was going on in the movie. And I asked him afterwards what he thought of it, and his direct quote was, "That was a very weird, strange movie. Probably not worth watching twice." So that was his takeaway from it. But yeah, no, I was definitely expecting a very much a more straightforward kind of movie, and this movie is
Yeah.
anything but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. There's actually I did a little bit of research, and there is some division on this because the critics gave this a 90%.
Yeah,
Audiences gave it about a 70%, which seems that seems accurate to me.
I'm kind of in the audience side on this one.
Yeah, it was. I felt like I was almost nothing about it was over for me overwhelmingly like, oh my god, this is amazing. I thought everything was good. I will say in the beginning, uh Willem Dafoe's acting, again, this is my first viewing. My opinions were very likely to change if and when I watch this again. Willem Dafoe's acting seemed very like, I was very aware of like he seemed like very like cliche sailor
Yeah,
accent, and it was a little like it just sounded like a character as opposed to a person. And Robert Pattinson, I think I noticed like I was very aware of acting, but
yeah,
as it went on, the performances did get really, really incredible.
yeah.
Uh,
I
yeah.
honestly have to praise Willem Dafoe for his commitment to this movie, and
Oh yeah.
you could tell he was having a blast with this movie. And I think you were the one who pointed this out to me first, Ben, when he did like his like monologue of like him basically like cursing
Oh yeah.
Robert Pattinson, that throughout that entire monologue, it's like 2 or 3 minutes, he does not blink the entire time.
It's like a solid 2 minute single take that he does not blink.
Yeah.
That's what
Uh,
the director said. Yeah, it was
yeah.
one take. And I want to bring this up though because so apparently they didn't really Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe didn't really hang out that much while they were shooting because the whole thing was so demanding and the weather was just horrible
Oh
that they
yeah.
were just so exhausted that they just didn't really talk that much other than when they were on screen. And apparently Willem Dafoe like was staying in like a little fishing cottage by himself, and Robert Pattinson stayed at the hotel with the crew. And also, apparently, before they started shooting, they had about a week of rehearsal, and the director had made note that Willem Dafoe was really excited for the rehearsal and really enjoys rehearsal because he has a background in theater, and Robert Pattinson doesn't. And he apparently looks at it as if he nails something in rehearsal, it the I think it said like the spontaneous uh, effect of it won't be the same when he's really actually giving his performance on camera.
Yeah, that's
So he
fair.
doesn't like, which I'm like, that's a very good point. And the director actually really liked how they were so different, even in their process, because of course it really just added to the chemistry.
Oh yeah, because they're polar opposites in the movie, so that definitely does kind of play off the chemistry that they have with each other.
But the weather apparently was so bad that like I think that it was referring to the scene in the beginning where he's hallucinating or dreaming of the mermaid and he's walking into the water. They had to wait because they were worried because there was a storm and they were worried they were going to lose him, and they're like, "Oh man, that's
Yes.
what a way to die."
Supposedly, most of the outdoor scenes and everything that are done in weather was done in real weather, and they used their rain and cloud and fog machines very minimally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there was only like a couple times where like I noticed that there was like an overabundance of fog, and I think the or just odd kind of like peculiar weather patterns, and I think the main one I noticed was when Robert Pattinson first kind of hallucinates seeing the logs drifting in the ocean of the his like old logging buddy that he more or less let die. We'll kind of get more into the story later, but he is that was one of the kind of like the more artificial kind of patterns of weather that I noticed in it. Everything else seemed very natural with like the seagulls flying around. And by the way, the specific scene with Robert Pattinson versus the seagull,
Oh my gosh.
that caught me so off guard in
Yeah.
theaters. And the fact that it went on for as long as it did just kind of kept
Oh
throwing me
my
for a loop.
god.
It's like,
I
holy
thought, yeah.
shit.
I thought he was gonna throw it in the tar, throw it on the ground. He just kept going, and holy shit! Like, I'm like, I feel like we all have come across like a bird or like a bug as being annoying, but we just go away. And it kept, but this one just like he just snapped. And then, I gotta say though, uh, the the story is interesting because he's you realize at the end, I will say the whole movie, obviously watch the whole movie because there
No, I
were
only want to watch half.
no, because I meant there were a lot of parts. I was just the beginning, I'm like I was just confused on like why is this I was confused why they were there. I didn't
Oh, okay.
understand like I feel like wasn't clear until almost halfway through. We don't even get their names until about halfway through the movie.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, we don't get like
yeah.
Willem Dafoe's name till like halfway through the movie, and like Robert Pattinson kind of just like kind of gives it shares his name because he's tired of being called like Laddie or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I'm tired of your nicknames, you old bastard. Call me
Winslow.
Ephraim. Yeah, Ephraim Winslow.
Yeah. But I was confused for why they're there, but the bigger thing was he uh he from the beginning, like his like day one, he's having nightmares and he seems to already kind of slowly losing his mind. And I thought at first I'm like, this is weird. Why is this happening day one? And the only thing I was thinking of was I was comparing it to Black Swan, which is another movie where someone's losing their mind.
Yeah.
And but in that, like it's her intense need to be perfect. That was an issue before the movie starts. And this is just what really sets her off and makes everything worse. And this I'm like, why is he going insane so quick? He hasn't been here long enough, and that was really bothering me. And then as it was going on, I was kind of I got confused because he introduced himself as Winslow when we finally get his name, but when I would pause it on I was watching on Amazon, and when I would
Oh
pause it,
yeah.
it said his name was Thomas Howard, and I'm like, what? And the only thing I could think of was, oh, maybe, and I know, and on IMDb there is a character, Ephraim Winslow, so I'm like, okay, maybe he like killed him or something and he took his
Yeah,
identity.
that's the one thing that I didn't like about watching it on Amazon Prime is that they kind of more or less give
Spoil.
away a yeah, that's a huge spoiler for the
But
movie.
also, why not just name him Winslow? And like that, because that's how he's referred to up until he eventually admits his real name. Like, or do both. Like, I don't, which is also a spoiler, but I don't know. It bothered me because I'm like, I the whole time like, wait, but so they're both named Thomas? What? Like, but yeah, that it bothered me more because I I don't like consistently asking questions like, why is this happening? What's going on? And even though I know I gotta just finish it because it will get answered, for
Yeah.
me, it takes me out of it because I'm just focusing on the stuff I don't know.
And that's one of the reasons why I was surprised you kind of want to pick this movie, because this is a movie where I feel like you have to constantly ask questions because they don't give you a straightforward answer. They kind of give you I feel like the best analogy for this movie is this movie getting answers is like asking a math teacher for an answer and they just give you the formula to solve that question. That's what this movie does. It just gives you the formula. It gives you like all the ingredients to figure out what the answer is without actually giving you the answer.
But you have to actually do all the work yourself.
You have to do all the work yourself. And I feel like the best example of this that is there's the fan theory of who put the mermaid statue in Pattinson's bed cot. And the popular fan theory is that Willem Dafoe put it in there since he was in the room before Pattinson. Um, and that kind of like sparked like the whole him like hallucinating seeing like the mermaid and that whole kind of routine that he kind of went into in the shack. Of you know, when you're alone for over a month, you kind of gotta needs need to be met. And I don't know how else to say that. But yeah, the popular fan theory is that Willem Dafoe planted that for Robert Pattinson to find and kind of slowly turning him insane. And Pattinson even like kind of confronts the Fro like later on in the movie after they've been stranded there for God knows how long. They never even specify how long they were even there in the movie. They
So Robert Pattinson, to clarify, Robert Pattinson is supposed to be there for about a month.
they're both
And
supposed
I
to
think
be
it
there
was
for a month.
oh,
4 weeks.
so they both. Well, because that's what I also got confused with. I'm like, so wait, does Willem Dafoe just live here year round, and he just gets a new person to help him out, like
No,
every so often? Like I was
in the beginning of the movie, they're both leaving the ship, and then the two other
right.
like lighthouse attendants leave. So it's basically that was just their shift change, and they're there for a month.
Okay, because the when he was, that's what I was getting confused on because at first I thought this was I thought maybe like this was just like was this like a punishment? Like, oh, you guys they're sailors, they did something, they have to tend to the lighthouse for a couple weeks as their punishment. Is it a like yeah, is Willem Dafoe just there all the time? Or is it like just I don't know.
Yeah,
I was
it
confused on
it he
Willem
yeah.
Dafoe's intensity about why like no, I deal with the light. I deal with the light. I deal with the lighthouse. You do your other duties. Like he's been here before.
Yeah,
Like he's done this so many times, so I
yeah,
wasn't sure.
I think he
Okay.
said that he's been doing it for like over 13 years. And uh, Pattinson, like kind of going back to like the whole like crazy fan theory of uh that Pattinson kind of confronts Willem Dafoe, saying that like, oh, like you're trying to drive me mad, like you drove your other lighthouse wiki mad because like I found his head in the lobster pot, and I'm not even sure if like that even actually happened because there's so many moments in this movie where like we think something's actually happening only to find out that oh this is just he's just going crazy, like him seeing the mermaid stranded on the shore or seeing all the logs kind of rolling up on shore and just a bunch of other small inconsistencies. So it's like, did he actually see the previous lighthouse assistant's head in the lobster pot, or did he imagine that? And it just kind of subvert your expectations of, oh, this is actually what's straightforward and is happening, to, oh no, he's actually going insane and Willem Dafoe is just a crazy old bastard.
Yeah. I thought there literally becomes a point where I'm like, you really don't know what is real anymore, and so
No,
I just kind of went with it.
yeah,
Again, referring to Black Swan, it does kind of the same thing, but like in Black Swan, like it's you think you don't know what's real, but then there's like a little relief of oh no, this is reality. Like this is her insanity. And there wasn't. I think there technically was relief. It just, because of the intensity of it all, it wasn't clear, which which worked. I'm not like, I don't really look at that as an issue. Um,
Yeah.
it didn't not make sense.
Yeah, there. I feel like everything was more or less kind of like wrapped up, mainly because spoiler alert, both characters die. But it was just kind of a matter of how they were able to get to this state, because in the beginning, like, they're coherent, they're just kind of like begrudgingly going about their tasks. Like, Willem Dafoe is just very like adamant and kind of a slave driver to Pattinson, and like refuses to let him go in the light. It's like, no, that's my duties. I'll watch the night shift. You do all your duties during the day, and pretty much tells him that he's doing a crap job all the time. Um, but it is kind of interesting, kind of seeing how, I guess, rapidly Pattinson kind of loses it, because for the most part he's kind of the protagonist of this movie, or antagonist. He's the main focus of this movie. Everything we
Mm-hmm.
kind of see is from his perspective and his point of view. Um, but it's just kind of interesting, kind of seeing how the wheels kind of turn in his head, so to speak, to go from a fairly sane individual, like a pretty competent, stable individual, to going batshit insane and killing Defoe with an axe. But yeah, it was just, it's an interesting movie, and I know I'm kind of sounding like a broken record saying that, but I really have no other way to describe this movie, because I'm I was still on the fence on whether or not I liked this movie after seeing it in theaters, uh, because I was so confused as to processing this movie, because it's a lot to process. There's just a lot of moving parts with this movie. Um, but it,
So,
it it is kind of funny, just kind of like going over like all the fan theories, and I think, Ben, you were telling me
It's
about like this really funny fan theory that like Willem Dafoe is like a
it's
warlock or something.
yeah, it's
what?
the theory that I like is the movie's literally spellbinding. Well, there's two different side effects to this. It's one,
Yeah,
the movie itself is literally spellbinding in that it casts a spell on the viewer that upon watching it, me and Kevin kind of even noticed this when we watched it,
a
is
little bit.
like that first 10-15 minutes after we left the theater, we just couldn't form a coherent thought.
We really couldn't, like the entire drive back from, like, we saw this in the theater in like Elk Grove, and like driving back to Lodi. It's like a good like 30-minute drive, more or less, and like the good like a good half of that we're just like, the fuck did we just watch?
Like, so yeah, that happened. That was a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and
And then there's a
yeah,
point where we were coming home and the spell broke, and then we could just like talk normally again.
yeah, and I feel like that kind of more or less happened with my dad as well, because when I asked him like a question about the movie, he just kind of had a hard time forming a fairly coherent sentence, and it just kind of came up with like that quote. It's like, it was a weird, strange movie. Wouldn't watch it again. It was like that was as coherent and as of a response as I really got out of him. And what was the other part of that then?
And then the other part is that in the movie, Willem Dafoe's character is like a witch or a warlock or some sort of magical being. In that his like nightly ritual when they're having dinner of the toast that he gives every night, it's always the same, and I don't have the exact text of it, but
Yeah, it was like,
he always gives
oh,
that
like
same ritual, and
may
that's
the sea foam take ye to bed, or something like that. Yeah,
him like casting like a warding spell that protects them from the danger of the sea or the madness or whatever. And it's after you stop seeing that on screen, that's when things start to delve into more madness and things go out of control.
yeah. And then his
That's
whole like,
interesting.
2-minute monologue of cursing Pattinson with like the wrath of Poseidon's trident, and all that was him cursing him. And like pretty much like right after that is when we get the storm, or like kind of like within that
Yeah.
same like segment of time.
That actually, I want to, for two things about that scene. Um, there, despite the intensity of this movie, there were a few. Oddly enough, there were a couple jokes in this, and
Yeah.
it was like surprise. Like, so that's the after he gives his whole like cursing him because Robert Pattinson is like again losing his mind. He's drunk and he's saying how he can't stand his cooking, and then after the whole curse, he's like, "Fine, I like your cooking," and then it just cuts. And I was like, "What?" But there was almost it looked like almost tears in Willem Dafoe's eyes when he says, "You like my lobster." Just say you like my lobster, and I was thinking of like this is like a really intense scene of a tense version of the scene in Emperor's New Groove, where Yzma's like, she's like, I never liked your Spanish pups. Like that was my first thought. I was like, geez.
That's it. She's going down.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god.
There was something else that happened that made me think it was like an intense version. I don't, it'll come to me later, but yeah, there were like, it was odd. Like I don't think I was expecting it. And it wasn't really like, oh, that's like a laugh out loud joke. It just for such an intense scene or tense monologue for like a little tiny joke to like ease the tension like by 1%. Like
Yeah.
it didn't like it's not like a ha ha, but and there was another one and I can't think of what it was, but
Well, the only thing I can really think of is like Willem Dafoe like constantly like farting and generally being kind of like a gross dude, which I don't think they were using primarily for a comedic effect,
no.
and because I think this is like the best example of like rule of three in terms of a joke. And for those of you who don't know, rule three is that pretty much a joke after you tell the same joke three times, the first time it's funny, second time it's not so funny, third time is kind of like the peak of that joke, and anytime after that, it proceeds to get repetitive and annoying and no longer gets funny. And that's kind of how they were using Willem Dafoe's farts, because he farts multiple times throughout this movie. It's kind of funny the first time, not funny the second time, kind of funny the third time, and then after a while, it just gets really old and really annoying, and kind of makes you go a little crazy, just like how Robert Pattinson snaps. And this is one of the reasons, like towards the end of the movie, it's like, oh, you farts, you fucking farts. He almost goes like full Boston when he does that rant, which was kind of funny because it sounded like his accent changed to like, ah, bloody your farts. Like he was like saying it with a Boston accent, and I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I knew that was in there, and I don't know what I was expecting. I think because I knew what's in there, I thought it was going to be a lot more awkward or more comedic. Like I thought, because based on how I was hearing it, I thought it was just like he's doing it specifically not because he's old and being gross, but because he's trying to annoy Robert Pattinson. But
Yeah,
it seemed more like he's just doing doing it,
like
and I'm like, what was I expecting?
I mean, he's like pretty much been like it's been him and like some other guy doing this for God knows how many years, like well over 13 years. Um, but it was just really kind of funny seeing how all these like uh peculiarities in one's personality can kind of drive you up the wall when you're forced to interact with that person for so long in a confined space that all the little things that annoy you just slowly build up to the point where you've just finally snap,
Yeah.
which I thought was really kind of cool and interesting to see.
Did you guys see somebody took I didn't watch the whole thing because I hadn't seen the movie. I saw like a little bit of it, but somebody took clips from the Lighthouse and combined it and then replaced it with music from SpongeBob.
Yes, I did, and oh my god, that is one of my favorite videos
I need
after
to go
seeing
find
this.
that.
It is. I'll put it in our chat, but it is so funny because I think instead of like the foghorn sound effect that they play throughout this entire movie, which also kind of helps drive the insanity of this movie because you hear this like a very limited time, whereas these two characters here are 24/7 for well over a month. They replace it with the sound effect of SpongeBob's alarm clock, that like
Yeah.
foghorn sound. And it was just, oh my god, it is so funny and it fits way too well with this movie. And I feel like it would have the exact same effect, if not make it scarier, using that like cheerful music.
I've seen this before. Somebody took they took SpongeBob and they replaced the audio with like scenes from Pulp Fiction. Like for some reason, SpongeBob seems to like transcend a lot across so many twisted movies.
I've seen that. I've seen that a lot with like SpongeBob and Shrek and like other like popular like Disney like and other like cartoons where they just either dub over the audio or like they animate it in that
Yeah.
like cartoon style of like the 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 shootout scene with uh in Pulp Fiction is like when I lay down my justice upon thee. Like I've seen that with like I think it was Shrek, and he was like shooting like Prince Charming or something. It was a long time ago, but it is a really kind of funny thing seeing something that is primarily for children taken into that realm of like violence and adult content, and it's just really funny seeing them in situations where they're doing all this stuff where it's like that's not a wholesome family moment, he just killed a guy.
How I want your both your guys' opinions.
Mhm.
How do you guys feel on so the entire movie is black and white, and I know that yes, it definitely makes it look more dreary and every day's the same, and it does help with the overall effect and tone. But I was thinking like, how would this movie be significantly different if it was uh in color? Not, of course, very vibrant or bright, but like, would there be? Do you think there'd be an overall change in the film or tone if it wasn't in black and white?
Why don't you start, Ben?
I feel like the movie would have a different overall effect if it was in color.
Because they still could have made it dreary
Yeah,
looking,
yeah,
but
it
yeah.
could have been like sepia or something like that. But I think the black and white lends to the experience of the movie. I guess.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that. I generally really enjoyed the overall black and white tone. It definitely kind of helped keep everything that same kind of dull, dreary tone. There's only one scene in particular that I feel like would have a massive change if it was in color. And I remember after watching this movie, I kind of did a little bit of research because at the end of the movie, there was a specific line that Pattinson delivers after he more or less like beats the crap and beats Willem Dafoe into submission, has him barking like a dog. That kind of leaves some room for interpretation, and I had to look into it to see if that actually did happen. I think you know what I'm talking about, Ben, because I think I mentioned this after we saw the movie. Um,
I think so.
uh, the implication is, and I think they kind of more or less confirmed this with a very subtle change in the choice of wardrobe after that scene where Willem Dafoe is like walking on all fours and basically being thrown in the pit that they dug. Um, and that is his long johns, specifically along his backside, have a lot of dark stains on it, and the implication is that those are blood stains because he was just raped by Robert Pattinson.
What? Oh
Uh,
my god.
So I feel like if that was in color and that was confirmed specifically in color, that would have a huge implication rather than just the you not having any idea, Sam, basing off of your tone.
I will say, based on the it got things got so intense. It did occur to me that I kind of felt like it could go there. It
Yeah,
did. It did cross my mind. That is how twisted and dark and intense everything was.
yeah,
But I did not notice that.
yeah,
Yeah, I
No.
didn't notice that either time I watched it.
yeah. It was I
Holy
remember,
crap.
yeah, no, I remember seeing this, and it was like a very like faint like wardrobe detail. Like his long johns, like they're like relatively dirty. It's like a pretty much consistent like staining like around like his like sleeves because he's like crawling around in the mud and dirt. But his like backside, mainly like around like his butt, has like a very
Oh my god.
it's a lot more pronounced than like the blood stains like on like his front because he just he got the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
And it was just, if that was in color to confirm that, if that actually did happen, that would have a completely different outcome on people's take on Robert Pattinson's character, because for the most part he's, I guess, the protagonist that just slowly goes insane and turns into the antagonist at the end.
Yeah.
But I feel like if that had happened in color, it, like that change would have just been as dramatic as possible. It would have changed like a light, rather than the very slow, gradual decline of him burying him and then killing him and just doing all of that, of him basically slipping completely into madness by that point. But yeah, it is a very hard detail to not notice when you, I only stumble upon that by accident, of them kind of like, oh yeah, here's this wardrobe, kind of like implying that this happened. It's like, wait, what? um
Holy shit. Oh my god.
yeah, so it definitely
I
does
didn't
make
think.
that whole interaction with them towards the end a lot more harder to watch now.
Yeah, it definitely changes the end of the movie.
100%, yeah.
You know what I was thinking when he basically threw him, or he puts him in the pit and starts to like bury him. I was
Mhm.
thinking, this was that other scene that I thought this was a more intense scene of that part in Step Brothers when he's like, "What are you
let,
doing? I'm burying
let the
you.
let the dirt wash over you.
You're waking the neighbor. Shut up."
And it was also really, it was also, I also have to commend Defoe's performance of still delivering a monologue while being buried and just having a face full of dirt and it just
That
going.
was so
I
impressive.
Yeah, and he's just more or less just kind of like eating it so he can continue delivering this monologue. It's just like, I have the utmost respect for Willem Dafoe and his performance in this movie.
Yeah.
I actually want to we I kind of want to talk about the very end of the movie, because after he after Robert Pattinson kills Willem Dafoe, he gets the key. Actually, but earlier in the movie, he was trying to take the key because he really wants to go. He was obsessed with going into the lighthouse. But I gotta
Yeah,
say, the obsession was it was a weird obsession, because we're seeing him go insane, but what we weren't seeing like the lighthouse haunt him. It was all of these other things that were, it was mostly his past, and the
yeah.
mermaid and the logs, all of those things were really torturing him. The
I
lighthouse
think,
seemed to be just like, I don't know, like, is that his escape, just his way of, I need to see, like, his, I don't know, it was an on and off obsession.
I think he was mainly obsessed with it
He
because,
couldn't go in there.
like, he couldn't go. It was like, I want it because he can't have it, kind of thing. And it was
Yes.
also the only thing that Willem Dafoe had that he could more or less lord over Pattinson's. Like, no, I'm the only one who tends to the light.
Yeah.
You don't tend to that, you oldly dog. And it was just kind of like, I guess, like a power trip for him, for Dafoe. And I think that was just kind of Pattinson's kind of like, I want to seize that power for myself kind of thing. Like, I want to
Yes.
experience what you were experiencing, because multiple times when we see Willem Dafoe in there, he is either A, completely naked and drunk in there, or I'm pretty sure he was jerking off in there at one point.
That's what that
Um,
was.
It's heavily
Okay,
it's
wait.
implied.
heavily implied, yeah.
So I don't want this to turn into another American Werewolf in London dick conversation that I might have misinterpreted, but
Well, I want to know where this is going
well,
now.
when we think he's jerking off, and then there was stuff coming out of the like ceiling, was that what, like,
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you think it
oh my
is.
god, see, I didn't want to bring it up. There were a couple masturbation scenes, and the one
Which is not a thing that I knew going into this
with
movie.
Robert Pattinson, though, obviously it's very obvious that's what it is. Whereas
Oh
there's
yeah,
the Willem Dafoe ones are you're seeing just enough that you can piece it together. But the first
yeah.
time I was like, wait, what? And I was like, is that what he's, oh my God. And it wasn't until like later where I'm like, oh, well, but, oh,
It's
gross.
like, oh, you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. No.
But, so anyway, yeah, Robert Pattinson at one point, like, he's trying to take the key and almost kills him. He almost kills Willem Dafoe for it, and then Willem Dafoe wakes up and like, oh no, go back to your duties. But later, after he does kill him, he does go into the lighthouse and sees the light, and then falls down the stairs, and then it just cuts to he's being eaten by the seabirds. And
Yeah.
my first thought was, is this making a reference to Prometheus, who in Greek mythology took he stole fire and gave it to uh, mortals, and that's why Earth has fire. And so Zeus confined him to a rock and had his liver pulled out every day by birds. And that was my first thought. And I didn't remember the name if it was Prometheus, but I knew like that myth, and I was wondering like if that was what it was, and if it was that, if anything, I thought was kind of weird because there wasn't any other references to Greek myths, so I didn't know if I was reading too much into it or if it was just.
Well, I feel like this movie you have to read into it, otherwise you're not going to get any answers.
Okay,
so I don't think there's any way that you could read too much into this, because this entire movie revolves around you looking beyond the surface of this movie, because nothing is taken at face value or is what it really says it is. Like, there's multiple times in this movie where I was kind of second guessing myself between, is Willem Dafoe crazy or is Robert Pattinson crazy? Because multiple times in the movie, Willem Dafoe says a story with very specific details, and then when Robert Pattinson references it later in the movie, Willem Dafoe has no idea what he's talking about and says that this happened instead. Like how he
the
has a
broken
bum leg.
Yeah,
like how he has a bum leg, or it's like, oh no, like we've been here for weeks. When it's weeks, it's like, no, we've only been here for a day. It's like, no, we've been here for weeks, and I've been telling you to ration for days, and you keep yelling at me like a dog. And it's like, oh yeah, and you just destroyed the dinghy after chasing me with that axe, even though we just saw Willem Dafoe do that. So like when that scene happened, it's just like, so has he been lying this entire time and Pattinson is sane? Because I kept going back and forth of like, oh, Pattinson's going insane because he's like not remembering all these things that Willem Dafoe has been saying. But then that scene with like him chasing him with the axe, like we just saw that happen. The axe is in the table where we just saw Willem Dafoe put it. So I guess he's been lying this entire time to make Pattinson seem like the crazy one. So it just kept kind of flip-flopping my opinions on both these characters on which one of them is actually crazy, when in fact I guess they both were.
I kind of looked at it as Willem Dafoe. Maybe they're both crazy, but Willem Dafoe has done this before, so it's more of he just like he's like beyond crazy. It's just who he is now, as opposed to like his mind has changed. I kind of looked at it as that, whereas Robert Pattinson's is we're watching him go. I mean, he already, based on his past, is already probably tormented and going insane a little bit, but this just made it, because
this was the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Because he more or less is dead by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Which that was one thing of like the ending of this movie, because it ends with him going into the lighthouse stops spinning, and like the actual light turning, it opens up in front of him. He kind of looks into it and just yells and goes insane. He then falls down the ladder and down the stairs, and then it cuts to him more or less naked and like in various states of like I guess dying, because he is like multiple wounds, like his eyes messed up. He's being pecked to death by a bunch of seagulls. And my main question was, how the hell did he get outside? Because he fell down the lighthouse, and the lighthouse is nowhere in sight near him.
Well, he was on the rocky beach right below the lighthouse, I think.
Yeah, but it's like, but Yeah,
But
it was
yeah,
like, but what the hell happened to his clothes then?
I mean, the
So
birds.
so so did he like fall down the stairs, get naked, and then just jump? Like, did he commit suicide at that point? Is like what I was kind of thinking.
when
Because
he's laying on the beach being pecked by the gulls, his body is still moving in ways that implies that he's still alive.
yeah, I know, but I
But
mean,
yeah,
like, did he throw himself on the rocks to commit suicide? Is what I'm trying to get at because of he's killed. He's more or less responsible for the death of two people. He's responsible for like the death of like his like
four men.
logging thing, and then he's yeah. I mean, we're talking about the very end of this movie. We're already past spoilers at this
Yeah.
point. Yeah, he was more or less responsible for the death of like the actual Ephraim Winslow, and then stole his identity, and then went here and then killed Willem Dafoe. So he is responsible for the death. He's like a murderer, an identity thief, and is like responsible for like voluntary manslaughter, I guess would be the ruling for that one. So it's like he would be going to jail for a long time, if not life or death. And so it's like I guess suicide would have been like the only option for him because there was no way he was going to get out of that. So I guess that was my takeaway for like the very end of the movie.
Something like that, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your kind of take on it, Ben? At the
Um,
very end.
I'm not sure. Is somehow he ended up outside and just let himself be taken by the birds or whatever.
Yeah. It was just there's so many different avenues that you can interpret this movie that I don't think that there's any correct answer for any particular scene or moment in this
Yeah.
movie, which I kind of find fascinating about this movie, but it also kind of makes it insanely frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is when you have a movie like that, I agree. It's incredibly frustrating, but it is also like, you can interpret it in a number of ways. So, I feel like it definitely makes sense if he had killed himself, but
Mhm.
part of me kind of looked at it more as just, if anything, my first thought was, wait, why is he totally naked? And then I remembered there is a scene where he is a bird is starting to like eat, like kind of like making a hole and like biting his pants. That was like
Yeah,
one of the things that was prior to him, I think, murdering a bird.
beating, yeah, yeah,
Um,
bludgeoning it against the cistern for like 30 seconds.
I think it could. I don't know. It could also just be simply like, I think for some reason I don't like the idea of him killing himself, just because that seems, for the I know that, yes, for the situation it seems too easy. Like,
Yeah,
I understand that, yeah, he would be going to prison for a long time, maybe for the rest of his life, but
yeah,
it still,
or just be put to death.
yeah, and it just seems like too easy of us. I think it was more of just, because I think it's the idea of like the lighthouse killed him, the island killed him. It was all of it, as opposed to simply self-inflicted. But there's
Yeah,
no real. It could be. It could. Who knows? Which is kind of the point.
yeah, no, like I'm not sure if like he actually did more or less try to like commit suicide at the end. I just feel like that is like the the logical like explanation for the ending rather than the possibly correct answer. I feel like
Yeah.
it's the most logical, but not necessarily the most correct answer,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it's just pretty much every scene can be dissected in multiple different ways, and I think it's just really interesting how everyone has like their own widely different opinions on specific scenes or character moments in this movie that completely differ from what anyone else says. And I think that's why critics loved this movie as much as they did by giving it 90%, and why audience didn't like it as much and giving it 70%, because this movie isn't for everyone. This movie is very much, it's an art house movie, and it is not what I was expecting going in face value. And I think that was a problem that a lot of audience members went into it, because I thought it was going to be a straightforward kind of uh, two men just going insane in a lighthouse and
Yeah.
just kind of being left at that, and just kind of having a lot more Lovecraftian kind of horror themes of like them going insane and just delirious from working in a very confined space for over a month. And I'm still satisfied with the movie that we got, but I am also kind of disappointed at the movie that we could have had, if that makes sense.
That would have been interesting if it was more Lovecraft style. I don't
Yeah.
know Lovecraft that well, but that would have definitely made it a more fun movie.
It
But
definitely would have made it a lot less polarizing with the audience if it was like that, because it wouldn't have left as much room for interpretation
mhm.
or loose ends that this movie kind of left. Because I mean, with all like the back and forth between like Willem Dafoe's like answers and responses to like throughout the movie, like we don't know for a fact how long he's been doing this, how he actually broke his leg, or what actually happened to his previous Lighthouse wiki. Um, because we get what Willem Dafoe says in one scene and then says something completely different, saying that Pattinson is wrong with the information that he was told the first time. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more frustrating that way, because we never really get a straight answer, or if we do, we can't accept it because we've been lied to before in this movie.
You can't take anything Willem Dafoe's character says at face value ever.
Yeah. No, he's either a compulsive liar or Pattinson is crazy. And since this is from the movie's more or less from his point of view, we're going crazy and frustrated like he is, which is why I think audiences didn't like it as much, because they experienced what Pattinson went through, which was frustration, irritation, and a psychotic breakdown.
That would have been interesting if it was more uh, Willem Dafoe's character's perspective, and like if we're watching someone go insane, as opposed to
What,
we are also
well,
going insane along with for the
I,
ride.
I, I feel like that was kind of like the takeaway of this movie, is because we're more or less focused on Pattinson, and we see his progression from stable person, relatively speaking, to completely batshit insane to possibly suicidal at the end.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I mean, like if we weren't seeing what's going on in his head, even though it makes no sense, it's still like it's jumbled and chaotic. And like if we didn't know that aspect of it, if we were just from from another party's perspective of watching him like from his normal self when he arrives to the end, you know. So I don't mean it in
yeah,
I mean it more in like an actual you're watching as opposed to we're along.
experiencing.
Yes.
Okay, I kind of see what you mean. Um, so I guess Ben, we'll kind of ask you. Do you think within like the realm of like real world elements, do you think that this movie could actually happen in real life the way that it did in the movie?
I think something very similar could happen. There's
I think something
nothing.
similar did happen. It's
Yeah,
based off.
yeah. It
I
was.
feel like this was
I think it was
it was
supposed to have
loosely
been
based off of
loosely
like an
based off an
actual true
actual event.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember the actual history behind what actually happened, but I do remember hearing that this a very similar event did happen.
It's something that's similar events with the same outcome could have happened.
Yeah. But like any like specific things that like, oh no, that couldn't happen because of this, or different consequences, like in terms of like a real world like results or punishments that would happen as a result of the events that happened in this movie, do you think this movie could have happened the same way that it did?
Yeah.
Care to elaborate? It's
Um.
like, yes.
Oh. It'd have to be two people stuck on an island for that long with those. That sort of a situation and everything that was going on around them. could eventually lead to that sort of. It would have to be two people with similar mentality. Those, oh dang, I'm not sure what the word is, but kind of people with that sort of
State of mind.
state of mind, or people that aren't super stable to begin with, being stuck in that sort of situation.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can kind of see that. I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as you because there is no real outside consequences that we see in the movie. It is just the direct results and actions between the two characters. So I feel like this movie would have happened the same way, regardless if it happened fictitiously or in real life. And I think for the most part, this did happen in real life. Um, so that should kind of more or less be the main answer for this. I feel like, Sam, what would your answer be for that?
I think I agree. I think it's weird. I this is probably I wasn't thinking about this as much on
Yeah.
how real this was because I was just like because there wasn't really anything in here that couldn't happen because everything that's really obscure or almost like uh mythical is we know is a hallucination or a dream or something.
There's nothing explicitly supernatural about it.
No, so it I think this all could definitely happen. Um I'm trying to I actually no wait no I feel like I feel like pretty much everything could happen. There's even a scene where we didn't mention this before where so Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are the most like almost on friendly terms when they're drunk.
Yes.
And there is a scene where
Yeah.
they're drunk and dancing and singing, and then it cuts to them like almost slow dancing, like they're just hugging each other pretty much and just like swaying. And there's a moment where it looks like they're about to kiss, and I was like,
Oh
"What?"
yeah.
Like, and then they just like push each other off, like okay. And
Yeah.
I even that, like, I felt I think everything about nothing about this seemed I didn't buy. I think if anything, it was just the way the story was told made it as an audience member made it confusing, but it didn't make it. It wasn't something that I didn't believe could happen. So I do think this is actually very real,
Yeah.
even in the weirdest, obscurest moments. I
Oh
thought
yeah, absolutely.
I will give you the very, very end. Is the one where I'm like, I can kind of how did he get there?
Yeah.
But I feel like there are reasons how we could have gotten there, though.
Yeah. It's just a matter of.
Going back to that, how we ended up there. I can't remember if I saw this theory or I came up with it, but there was another theory that when Pattinson's character falls off of the bosun's seat when he's painting the outside of the lighthouse, when he hit the ground, that's when he died, and that's how he ended up
Oh
on the
yeah.
beach. And so that's where the
Oh,
story actually ends, and the rest is just him, basically his mind playing out what could have happened as he's laying there dying.
but is that the same location?
I don't think so, but that
No.
could be chalked up to just a storm moved his body.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They kind of more or less like introduce a similar thing where like Willem Dafoe says like, oh, like how do you know you're still not up in Canada, up in the snowy white north, and you're freezing your ass off, and he's more or less implying that like, how do you know, like, if you're already crazy, then how do you know you're not still in Canada dying of the cold up there and just imagining that you're here, which I feel like is more along the same avenues of the theory that you just described, Ben, of just he isn't actually where he is, and this whole movie is just in Pattinson's imagination. Although I think your theory holds a little bit more water because we actually see him take a very like serious injury potentially and possibly dying
I
because
didn't pay super close attention. I think that's also one of the few places where the movie fully hard cuts to something
crazy.
else. Yeah.
Like the only other like crazy thing is like Pattinson like hallucinates seeing like the logs kind of drifting on shore and seeing like the dead body of like the real Ephraim Winslow, but I think that's just more guilt catching up to him rather than him like hallucinating and going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So I guess final thoughts on the movie. Let's start with you, Ben.
It was definitely easier to follow the second time through,
Yeah,
but there's still so much to think about with this movie.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. Seeing this the second time definitely kind of helped me absorb what I already remembered from this movie and kind of take in a little bit more, especially like, the whole like bark like a dog scene and like the following situations afterwards and just kind of just continue on through that way. Uh it was just really interesting kind of seeing how much I was able to retain after seeing it the first time and how I was able to continue on with the second time. Um I would say go and see this, but it is not for everyone. Um, my dad being the example for this because he had no idea what was going on. This movie is not for everyone, but I feel like I would recommend this for at least an initial viewing because there's just going to be something that you're going to take away from this that no one else will. So I 3.5 stars, I guess, and that's just a very solid a rating I can really give and a recommendation that I can give for this movie. Um, so yeah, I guess that's my takeaway. Sam, your final thoughts or recommendations or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I wouldn't say don't watch it. Of course, I'd say watch it, but I would say yes, this is an art house film. It is definitely an acquired
Yeah,
taste. Um, I would say though, watch the whole thing. Don't give up halfway through, which I get it. You might want to, because this to me reminded me of like a like a book I would have read in high school in English class that I would have no idea what's going on. Which about after freshman year, sophomore year and beyond, I just stopped knowing what was going on in
yeah,
English.
fair enough.
I like it just like things got so detailed and intense and stuff where I'm like, I don't what like
Yeah,
what's
no. By the
happening?
time we got to
So
Great Gatsby, it's just like, what are the what does the billboard mean? It's like, fr-
but Gatsby, I
it's
knew what
like
was going on.
advertising. What the
Like
hell do you want me to say?
I remember like Fahrenheit 451. Like I things were so detailed that I would just zone out, and I had no idea what was going on. In that there were just like things like that. But for this, uh, yeah, I would. This is just not for everyone. I don't think we can stress that enough.
No, no, we cannot.
If you really want something obscure and weird, I do recommend it. Uh, I do think this is. I've I think I said this before. It is considered an actor's movie. Like I think for actors, this is really a movie for actors and filmmakers or film
Yeah.
enthusiasts. Like I can't imagine. I feel like my dad would start it. I don't know if he would finish it. He might finish it. My mom would not want to
I
watch this. Like that's how
yeah,
I
The
no,
feel
reason
like
I'd
about
asked
this.
Kevin to go with me to see it is he's like the only person I know that would have been anywhere near okay with going to see it. I can't
yeah,
think of
no,
anyone else I know that would be down for it.
yeah, no, and I remember you sending me the trailers like, "Oh yeah, this looks awesome." And I was more or less expecting like either like a straight up like horror or like a psychological thriller, like something that kind of would be more face value than what this movie actually was. I was a little disappointed after seeing it, but that was mainly because I feel like the advertising and the marketing was not accurate to what the movie was trying to be.
I see that sometimes with film and television, and it kind of frustrates me because it's like, okay, that's how you're basically trying to get people in, and then it's
Yeah,
wrong. Like that's not what it is. And so of course it might not hold their
yeah,
interest. Like, okay, you get people to watch it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be perceived well. Film is different because film it can grow. TV is like, if it sucks, they're gonna just
yeah.
like
It's gonna
cancel.
get
But
canceled or just be
but
stuck on a permanent rerun loop for all eternity.
but with this, yeah, I think I don't even know what. So you like what genre would you say this is? Like psychological
I
thriller?
I
You say horror. I know we've had our discussion
I
on
yeah,
psychological
like
thrillers and horrors,
yeah,
but
for the most part, it is a dramatic horror piece. It is a dramatic period horror piece. Is I feel like the best way to describe this
Yeah,
movie.
something like that.
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
Um,
but by the way, Ben, would you, since you're kind of like a more casual moviegoer, would you like, how would you recommend this movie to someone?
I really
Or
don't
would
know.
you at all?
I'd have to know the person fairly well to recommend it to them. I
Yeah,
think
would you like you recommend this to like your family, like your mom or your dad or your sister or
I
any of
can
that?
almost certainly say none of my family would be okay with watching it.
Okay.
I remember like maybe a year ago, I was watching Pulp Fiction for the first
Oh.
time, and my mom was in the room, and she is not a fan of Tarantino, and and was obviously like I think it was at the scene where Uma Thurman OD'd, and they're trying to
Oh yeah.
bring her back, like, and my
Classic.
mom just was like, and my mom's just like in the room like reading, and she's like, oh, it's Sunday night, I should be, she was like mad, like she's like, I should be watching Hallmark, and like walks out of the room, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I was here first.
I should be watching Hallmark.
she really she really likes
My
Hallmark.
mom's more or less been like watching Hallmark for like the past month or so.
Hallmark, I will, in Christmas, sure. I'm any time of year. I get it. Like, I don't judge my mom for watching it or liking it because I totally get it. It's why I watch a lot of like reruns. Like I'll watch I go on a period of watching Friends, or I'll go on a period of
Oh
watching that
yeah.
70s show. It's just like something, it's an
Oh yeah, no,
escape. I'm not
I
it's
totally do
not
the same
that
thing with
like
like horror and like traditionally like Halloween movies, like randomly like, oh, I'm gonna watch this and it's spring. I don't care. I'm gonna watch a Halloween movie. I want to watch Hocus Pocus in mid-April because it feels Halloween today.
oh my god, that were actually for the other day for Friday the 13th,
Yeah.
like last week, my sister and her boyfriend and I watched Friday the 13th, but we watched the new
Oh,
one.
oh, you had me so excited for a second. Why?
It was so bad. Like Michael Bay, oh my god, it was
Oh,
horrible.
I
Like
forgot Michael Bay was attached to that.
I we were actually the part where the girl is wakeboarding topless and then her boyfriend gets shot with an
Yeah.
arrow, and then she's hiding under the dock from Jason, and then he sticks his machete underneath, picks her up just so we get one last like topless shot, and then drops her down, and we were all like, are you shitting me? It was so bad.
I mean, it's pretty bad. Although I recently like I've kind of going on that same tangent. I found a box set of like the first eight Friday the 13th movies, and I've been like kind of like casually watching them, and like my mom and dad have more or less been like watching them like with me, and there was one of them that there was one scene in particular. I want to say it was like the third or the fourth one, um, where
Is that Jason X? Jason
no
Goes to
no no
Hell?
no no
Jason
hold,
Takes
just
Manhattan?
let me tell the damn story. After a while, the titles just get repetitive and bullshitty. I don't remember what it was, but there was a scene where um this these two like camp counselors are like heavily flirting with each other, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to my cabin and get changed real quick. You wait right here. I'll be right back. And I want to point out the fact that the guy counselor is in a wheelchair. So she leaves to go put on something comfortable, and he like chills there, is like, oh man, I'm gonna get laid, and he kind of like goes out to the front porch, and it's raining. It's like he's calling for her because he thinks he hears something. Jason kills him. He then like pushes his body down the stairs because the the thing's on a hill, which was kind of funny. And when she comes back, she's like looking for him, and her first reaction is like, I'm gonna check upstairs on the second floor because that's where the most likely place where the guy in the wheelchair is. And it was just so stupid. It's like, wait, she didn't even check the first floor. Why is she checking upstairs first? There's no
Yeah,
wheelchair access in the 70s there.
One of the first scenes in the newer Friday the 13th, there's people like having sex, anal, of course, and in a tent.
Odd detail to add, but all right.
No, but they're like, oh, they think that it's Jason, but they think like their friend is out there watching. And I'm like, maybe you should have turned off the light so there wasn't a silhouette of like a whole freaking light show of it. It was like, holy shit. It was so bad. I was like, we were laughing and I jumped a few times like, oh my god, but like it was more scary about how bad it was.
You need to watch. At some point, we need to get together and marathon the OG like Friday the 13th movies, because those are like campy bad. That one was just like shit bad. It was just really funny. Ben, have you seen like that many of the Friday the 13th movies?
I don't think I've ever seen any of them. I generally don't like horror movies.
Damn it! All right, movie night at my place at some point.
Yeah,
this is happening.
I have watched more horror in the last like month plus than I have in my entire life.
You're welcome for that.
Like most of them were for this, and 2 were not. I think on Halloween my friends and I watched Sleepaway Camp. Holy fucking shit.
That's a fun one.
It's like it was just a bunch of kids at camp and then there's a killer. And the killer is irrelevant for like the first half of the movie, and then it all ties together and we all were just like, oh my god, like we all like lost our minds at the end. It was horrific.
No, when I originally watched Sleepaway Camp, I thought it was like, oh, this is gonna be like a really like funny, campy like Friday the 13th ripoff, because a lot of
that's what I thought.
And then after a while, it's like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And then I saw the sequels, and oh my god, they should have stopped at 1.
Yeah, we're just waiting now for the Lighthouse sequel where
Electric Boogaloo.
I don't know. Electric Boogaloo. Yeah.
It takes place in the near future of 2078.
A Lighthouse 3.
3D.
Yeah, 3D. Yeah.
The rule for horror movies is that once you get to the 3rd installment, it has to be in 3D. We got Jaws 3D, and we got Friday the 13th in 3D, and damn it, we're gonna have a Lighthouse 3D.
What would it be the same? Would it be the same Lighthouse? Like,
yeah,
that's causing the damage.
There's just a seagull that just shows up to try to peck your eyes out every once in a while. That's the only 3D element in the movie.
Oh my god! You know what? I'm glad. I'm realizing now. Lighthouse would have been disgusting if it was in 3D.
All right, well, let's stop that train of thought before this gets more off the rails. So this has been Movie Reel. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, all of that. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave us a recommendation anywhere you can on what movie you want us to do next. Ben, thanks for having us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Or being joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No, we're joining him today. Thanks for joining us today and kind of giving us your take on the movie. I know it wasn't easy for you watching it the second time, and I applaud you.
Actually, I didn't mind it the second time.
All right.
That's the key. If you really want to watch The Lighthouse, you have to watch it at least twice.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? It bugs me. There's so many movies like that.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad thing to say for this movie.
It's watching the movie in theaters was definitely one experience, but watching it at home with headphones on like a computer monitor was very different.
Yeah. I think just watching it with and without subtitles is enough of an experience on its own.
Yeah, that's our biggest recommendation. If you make the decision to watch this,
put
on the subtitles.
Watch it with subtitles, otherwise you are not going to understand like a third or I'm being generous. A third of what Willem Dafoe is saying is going to be incoherent gibberish.
Over the summer, I watched Kingsman, and I had to put on subtitles because some of the characters have such thick like Cockney accents. Yeah, that I like couldn't really understand, and it made me think of there was an SNL like movie parody of like it was like
with Russell Brand.
It was like British, extremely British, like they're just saying nonsense because they have such thick accents, and I'm like, gee, that's all I was thinking of, and it did occur to me for this because I couldn't really understand, so subtitles are recommended.
This has been Movie Reel. I'm Kevin Tracy.
I'm Samantha Thomas.
I'm Ben Deckert.
Bye, folks.